having my daughter honestly made me more dedicated to what I'm doing, because I realize that the world that we are going to be building is a world that she's going to help build and inherit. I had a why before, but that why seemed just very far away. And then after I had my daughter, you know, it was a situation where it's like I'm looking at the why right here. Like I want her and everybody else to inherit this world that we're fighting for.
Welcome to Fight Back Radio, a production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today we have a treat for you. We have one of the national leaders of the Black Liberation Movement, Monique Sampson, who's the treasurer of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. But before we get into today's interview, our last two episodes featured the Teamsters in the battle that they had with United Parcel Service, and they've reached a tentative agreement, and I wanted to just make a couple of comments on that before we get into today's episode. And the Teamsters, just to flash back to that, this was a long battle. I mean, from the time we went through decades and several cycles with the United Parcel Service under the leadership of the very backward Jimmy Hoffa, and where the concession after concession was made. And so there was a whole process of rank and file rebellion where they changed their leadership. And I want to say this, even though the power is clearly in the hands of the workers, leadership does matter. And so the fact that the members of the Teamsters changed their leadership, and they elected Sean O'Brien and others on that slate who were allowed them to wage the fight that they wanted to fight. So leadership does matter in these battles, but the power still is in the workers. And what happened at UPS with the Teamsters is they put a national campaign together and put a credible strike threat on the table. So they were ready, willing, and able to strike for what they thought was important. And in the final analysis, the employer backed down. Now, that doesn't always happen. I mean, sometimes you're ready, willing, and able, and you got to do it. You got to have the fight. And so many of the concessions that Hoffa gave away, not all of them, but many of them were won back. And that's huge. That's huge. That doesn't happen. Usually when you give something away, you give it away forever. Also, decent wages were won. And I think you have to say that the contract battle at UPS with the Teamsters was a victory for the Teamsters. And so we're going to, Freedom Road Socialist Organization had a forum which you can go back and listen to on Fight Back Radio. They're going to have another forum coming up, and we'll try to let people know about that as well. But I want to get to today's episode because we have an exciting episode with Monique. And she talks about the many different things that are going on in the Black Liberation Movement nationally, but she also brings her own perspective. She's a teacher and a leader of the Teachers Union in Duval County, which is where Jacksonville is in Florida. And some of the things that she has went through as a teacher dealing with students. And Florida, as people know, Governor DeSantis and the legislature there are setting new records for crazy right-wing legislation. But this affects, it's not just you read about it in the paper, this affects real people on the ground. And she talks about that and talks about how she and others in the Jacksonville community and in the Teachers Union have organized against it. She talks about her caucus within the Teachers Union. So these are important things of organizing a Black working class people to fight back and to fight for power. And Monique brings a unique perspective to this. The episode that we're airing today was actually, we had the interview a couple of months ago. We held it in part because of the teacher aspect, and school's going to be starting before too long. And so we thought we might give people to start thinking about education as the school year starts. But also the 50th anniversary of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression is coming up this fall. It's going to be, they're going to hold a conference in Chicago at my union, the Chicago Teachers Union, Union Hall, November 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And so I want encourage people to start to think about coming to Chicago, joining the National Alliance. We'll have how you can contact the National Alliance in our show notes, and you should, because this is an important event. The National Alliance was founded in the aftermath of the movement to free Angela Davis, but so many leaders over the years have come through that organization, including our guest today, Monique Sampson. So here is our interview with Monique Sampson. So welcome to Fight Back Radio, Monique. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, I'm happy to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So, you're a community leader, especially in the Black community in Jacksonville, Florida, and a teacher, and also a national leader in the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. But I want to start by talking to you about your teaching duties and what some of that is and how that informs your activism. So you teach at middle school, I think, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And well, that's a challenge. That's a challenge for sure. So okay, we're just finishing the school year after a pandemic. What's it like there now? Is it different than before the pandemic? There's been some political changes in Florida. What is it like to be teaching middle school in Jacksonville, Florida right now?
Oh my gosh, the changes from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic are absolutely crazy. Even at the start of the pandemic, the changes from now until then are crazy. There's a lot of gaps that that existed before that are now even wider gaps within our students that I'm finding. I teach Title I here in Jacksonville. It is a labor of love. A lot of the times there are achievement gaps, or there tend to be achievement gaps because the resources are not there. With COVID, people died, and that has been very terrible. I think the loneliness that the kids experienced and the changes that the kids experienced, seeing their loved ones get sick and pass away or getting sick themselves has just led to, I believe, students that are a lot more apathetic and honestly sad and depressed. So that's been very interesting, seeing the shift in mental health. I think we've always had that problem in education, where students' mental health is kind of not where, not the best or where it should be, to now after the pandemic, what we've seen is, it's been pretty bad. Students that have just lost their spark, as we call it. And a lot of people will be like, oh, well, it's lockdown. Well, in Florida, we weren't locked down. 2021, that school year was relatively normal. It was hybrid for a couple of 9 weeks, and then we went back to work as if it was normal. So yeah, there's been a huge shift, a huge change.
Wow, that's incredible. So I know you're a building rep in your union, and so what kinds of things as a union representative do you do, or do you try to organize your coworkers or family or whoever? How do you approach trying to deal with this situation?
Oh my gosh. So I've been a building rep for 3 years. I actually became a building rep after I had a very negative experience my first year teaching with a very, very horrible principal. I don't even know how to say it other than that. She was horrible. So I was like, you know what? I was already, of course, in the union, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to become a building rep. The spot was open. So I've had 3 principals in 3 years. And at our school, we have 2 building reps. We have a teacher chair, a para chair, so on and so forth. I was the second chair. And then the first chair ended up being reassigned to a new school. So this year is my first year as the first chair building rep. And it's so funny. I actually won the election as I was on maternity leave breastfeeding my daughter, and my friend Monica Gold texted me. He's like, okay, the election's over. You won, the people are really excited for you to get back. And yeah, I had a, screaming infant, and I was like, all right, this is going to be my first year, lead building rep. But some of the things we've experienced, especially with 3 principals over 3 years, just anything from, we have a collective bargaining agreement that is set in stone. It is a beautiful collective bargaining agreement. Shout out to my union, DTU, Duval Teachers United, for negotiating that. So we've had to deal with stuff like the administration essentially not following the tenets of the collective bargaining agreement, trying to coerce people to give up their planning time to substitute because there's no teachers. The shortages were so bad my second year that they were just sticking all of the kids in the cafeteria in the gym. There wasn't really anything that could be. God. We didn't have any teachers. I mean, you can't put kids where there's no teachers. So, for the first year post-COVID, I believe it was that 21-22 school year, I mean, we really didn't have any place to put the kids. But the principal that we had, he ended up being reassigned mid-year. So we had another principal come in, and thankfully he was, more competent than the two that we had before and address the problem of the vacancies by just adding different sections and adding different classes. It wasn't a very popular choice, but it got the kids out of the cafeteria and the gym. So, I mean, we've had to deal with stuff like that. We've had to deal with like safety considerations. We've had to deal with everything from the principal I told you was the reason that I became a building rep, just how she would speak to people, things that she would do. In our contract, it's very clear that you're not allowed to chastise teachers in front of people. We have progressive discipline, and she would not follow that. So we had to deal with that. This year, we are not dealing with as many issues as we have in the past. And I think that just comes from our school is majority union, and all of us are making sure that the administration is following the terms of the collective bargaining agreement.
It sounds like you also need more revenue to come into the school district, into the school system. I mean, if you're going to retain teachers and other educators, for that matter, as well, you need to pay them a living wage and be able to hold on to them, but also hire social workers and whatever, nurses, librarians, all the things that it takes to run a school. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I remember my first year starting in Duval County, I made $38,500 with my credentials. And thank God, I have a husband that works a job, because otherwise I would not be able to do anything. The next year we got bumped up to $47,500. But for a while the governor said, hey, teachers get raises, but did not provide the money for the raises for quite a long time. So the unions had to negotiate. And thankfully we were bumped to $47,500. This year, we are expecting a significant pay increase. We passed the mill here in Jacksonville, which is a tax that is essentially going to be used to fund teacher salaries so that we can retain teachers here. It's bad. I always joke. I'm like, you know what? It's not even a joke, but I look at who we have on staff and I'm like, okay, 1 out of 4 of you are going to quit before December. And then maybe another 1 out of 4 of you are going to quit after you get done with spring break and you realize I can't do this anymore, So we need to retain teachers. I mean, it's a really tough job, and you get paid pennies to do a tough job, and it's just not fair. We have families and bills and mortgages and everything just like other people.
Wow. So let me ask you also, I know that you're also involved within your union. There's a group called the Duval Coalition of Rank and File Educators. Could you tell our Fight Back Radio listeners what that is and what kinds of things that coalition does?
Yeah, so Duval Corps is a couple years in the making. We're essentially a group of progressive teachers that like to work very closely with community groups. We hold protests, call-ins, email-ins. We held an International Women's Day event that was really nice. Our union president came to speak at it and talk about the union busting bill that is currently in the, that the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, proposed. So we are essentially just a group of progressive people looking for help from our community and looking to help our community and fight for issues. Like, for example, during the pandemic, we were fighting for safety precautions for teachers. We have had events where we have spoken out against the termination of Jasmine, which was or termination of the contract with Jasmine. Jasmine is a nonprofit that helps and protects homeless LGBTQ youth, and our school district decided to sever ties with them completely. We believe it was because of the legislation, like the Don't Say Gay bill that was passed and all this other stuff that ultimately led to that rash decision. We've gone to the school board to speak to our school board chairs. We do a lot in Duval Corps. We are also hopefully going to be planning a May Day rally April 29th.
Wow, that's a well. Let's back up. Let's break this down a little bit because you raised a lot of issues there. So I know I work with the Chicago Teachers Union here in Chicago, And so I'm familiar with some of this, but we've been fighting as well the issue of homelessness and trying to have supports in the schools and also, for that matter, fight for public housing, which is something that is pretty much disappeared in this country. But what kinds of things did you do as they broke off relations with the agency or the organization that was providing services, and what kinds of things is Duval Corps calling for?
So we essentially were calling for the reinstatement of those services for our students. One of our members in Duval Corps, she runs the local GSA, the Gay Student Association, and a lot of her students were kind of freaking out by it because Jasmine is rooted into our schools. A lot of LGBTQ youth look to Jasmine for a lot of resources. So we decided to take it right to the school board. We went right after work. We held a rally. It was so funny because there was another pop-up rally about the banned books that are happening here. They were banning a lot of LGBTQ books. So we just merged our rallies together because ultimately we want the same thing, safety and representation for our students.
Yeah, no. So why don't you talk a little bit then about it's gotten a lot of national press, this Don't Say Gay ordinance or whatever. And you've I think that's what you were alluding to here with some of this, the cutting off of things with Jasmine and working with people, banned books, etc. Could you talk a little bit about what that looks like on the ground and what you're doing to try to organize to support LGBTQ students in your school and elsewhere?
Yeah, so the Don't Say Gay bill was supposed to primarily affect K through third graders, but ultimately it has affected us all over. I had a friend we have these stickers that are provided from the district, that they're safe space stickers with the rainbow. There was an email sent out in which we were told anybody that has these stickers, they need to be removed in order for you to be in compliance. So they had us remove our safe space stickers that had the rainbow on them to be in compliance.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
To be in compliance. And people were very upset. There has been incidents where teachers have had their desktop screen being their partner, and the desktop screen was removed somehow, mysteriously, So a lot of people have felt a lot of different things about these various bills, especially now that they're expanding. Instead of K through 3, it's going to be K through 12. So one of the ways that we're fighting back and just asking for support is we're holding rallies, we're holding call-ins. We are trying to make sure that we get the word out. We're supporting people any way that we can. We went to a rally for Trans Day of Remembrance, in which we talked to our community members about what we're trying to do. We saw a few teachers that were at that event saying, we want safety for our students. We want our students to know that they are loved and that they are cared for, so on and so forth. So we are essentially just trying to build a community organization within CORE that is going to be addressing the negative effects of these bills. These hateful bills are essentially going to bring our children.
Yeah, and I want to follow up another bill. There was the banning of the teaching of critical race theory, which is really, it's a whole more complicated theory of how things are. But in the interpretation in Florida, from what I understood, was basically not teaching Black history or Black studies of any kind, and across the board, for middle school, it would look different, obviously, than high school. But creating a teaching pride in the culture and the past of oppressed peoples. And so, could you talk a little bit about that and how your union or how your caucus has dealt with that?
Yeah, so specifically about the book banning, it's very insidious because you could receive a felony for giving a student a book here that is not approved by the state or by a book. It's some type of literary specialist that we don't have because we don't even have librarians. Most of the schools don't have nurses, so why would we have a literary specialist? But so essentially what we have done as the Duval Corps as we have essentially we've talked to our community members about these things. We have partnered with community organizations to go out to events and speak and stand in solidarity. We have done a few call-ins as well for these bills, calling our local senator, calling our local representative that may have the opportunity to vote yes on bills like this. Thankfully, we do have a representative here, Angie Nixon, who is very helpful and wonderful when it comes to speaking out against these things and representing the people of Jacksonville. But she's she's a minority in a majority of people that want these bills to pass in the Florida legislature.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a complete an effort besides politically banning, but also there's a defunding effort. It seems to be of public education in the South and in Florida, particularly in this case. Some of the the neoliberal, the charter school model has come to Florida as well. And could you talk a little bit about one is what does that look like in Florida or in Jacksonville, but also how has that affected your school?
Oh my gosh. So there's actually a bill that has been signed into law by the governor. It was HB 1 SB 202. They called it the school choice bill, but it essentially is defunding public education. I believe one person estimated by $1 billion. So essentially it revised the provisions that allowed for the expansion of school vouchers. So it led to an increase of funding leaving our public education system and going to the charters and going to the private schools. The crazy thing about the charters and the private schools, and I'm sure I don't have to preach, to the choir here, is that they can take that money and kick those kids out and still keep that money. In public education, we're not able to do it. So this would look like, and it was really funny because this, an incident went viral where a legislator was talking about how this bill, he's a millionaire, was going to help him send his kids to private school. So these people are getting scholarships that are taking funding away from public education to send their children to private schools. And this was something that was championed by the governor, championed by House leadership, and it was something that passed. I don't believe that we will see the effects of this, what people are calling defunding our public schools, until the fall, because it was just signed into legislation this legislative session, which is still ongoing. It's not over yet. So it's been a rough one.
So, and this governor wants to be president of the United States.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
So let me. I'm going to pivot a little bit here, though. Besides being a school teacher who's active in her union, you're also active in your community. You're a member of the Jacksonville Community Action Committee.
Yeah.
Do I have the name right?
Yes.
So could you tell us what the Jacksonville Community Action Committee is and what kinds of things that they're involved in?
Yeah, so the Jacksonville Community Action Committee was a group that was founded in 2017. Our main tenets are we want police accountability, self-determination for our communities. We want everybody to be well-fed, well-educated, so on and so forth. We want underrepresented areas like the north side of Jacksonville to be built up. We want infrastructure. We want a city budget that reflects the needs of the people and doesn't prioritize policing. Right now, we are focusing on launching our upcoming ballot initiative, the Public Safety Committee ballot initiative, that is essentially going to help us get to our first step of police accountability, because essentially there's none here. There's none here at all whatsoever. So we're trying to build that and build a better future for ourselves and for our community. So we do a lot of stuff. We work very closely with the Mothers of the Movement. We have an annual event, Red Day, which is in remembrance of Vernell Bing Jr., who was shot by a serial killer cop, Tyler Landerville. He's killed a lot of people here. So we do things like that. We have protests. We go to Tallahassee to support our sister organizations as well. So we are very active in the
Tallahassee's a state capital.
Yeah, Tallahassee's a state. For those of you that don't know, Tallahassee is a state capital. So we oftentimes go to the state capitol to protest and stand in solidarity with our sister organizations. We just went there a few weeks ago, 2 of our members to represent at the SDS rally that was held to discuss the governor's banning of diversity and inclusion initiatives on campus, as well as possibly, under that bill, you could also possibly ban multicultural fraternities and sororities as well.
So that's the thing that the Tampa 4 were just the people we've talked about here on Fight Back Radio. Some of our listeners may know people at the University of South Florida who were brutalized and arrested for calling for diversity at the college level and the ability to teach and hire staff that are diverse. Yes, I mean, solidarity is everything in those kind of things. Let me go back, though. You said, I mean, you were talking about the Jacksonville Community Action Committee, and I mean, you have a list of righteous demands. You seem to be focused right now on this issue of community control of the police, and could you talk a little bit what you were about? You want to change the city charter? Could you explain what campaign you're involved in right now?
Absolutely. So we are going to be launching a ballot initiative that is going to change our city's charter. Within our city's charter, we have various things that essentially say, you can't have a civilian review board, you can't have this language that essentially makes having some sort of police accountability or any form of police accountability that will actually be helpful illegal, or you're not able to do that. So essentially, we are going to be petitioning to create a public safety committee. We modeled it after legislation that was proposed by Councilman Garrett Dennis here, who was a lovely city councilman that often got bullied by the FOP and other people because he wanted to propose measures of accountability in our community. So we modeled it after that legislation. We have to get we have to get a lot of signatures. Our goal is 50,000. We are a consolidated city, so we have a lot of people here. I believe that...
What is a consolidated city?
A consolidated city, like, for example, here in Jacksonville Beach is 40 minutes away from me, but that's still part of the city of Jacksonville. I would look at it, I'll use Chicago as an example. If all of the suburbs of Chicago were merged and meshed into one big city and it was all called Chicago. That's what consolidation is. It consolidated all of these cities that were outside of Jacksonville into one big Jacksonville, which people argue diluted Black representation and Black power here in Jacksonville by doing that. So we are a consolidated city here in Jacksonville. We are, yes.
So let me, okay, so it strikes me as you're talking, it's a lot of this stuff, maybe I'm going back in history, but I'm thinking about the Reconstruction era when we had public education, which was a product of Reconstruction, where, the ex-slaves actually said we need to have a high quality of education, so we can be voters and citizens. And then the betrayal of Reconstruction, where they said, no more of that. We'll have separate but equal, but we'll give all kinds of power to the police. And it seems like, here we are, 150, I'd have to do my math here, but something like 150 years later. And that's what we're still fighting with. We're trying to, fund your schools, and we're trying to give you some control over your community and take, make the police work for you rather than you work, the police terrorizing you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're trying to build here. I mean, Reconstruction, people here in the South still feel the effects of the betrayal of Reconstruction. If we look at our schools that are in certain area codes serving certain populations, they are completely different than, let's say, a school at the beaches. And we just want a community here in Jacksonville. When I say we, the Jacksonville Community Action Committee wants a community here in Jacksonville that serves the many and not the few. Okay.
No, that makes sense. Let me ask you also. I know you're a new mother, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And you're a TikTok rock star. Yeah. So you go through your pregnancy. You documented it, but now that you are a mother, you're an activist. You have hopes and dreams for your students, but also for your child. Could you talk a little bit about that and what your hope is for the future?
Oh my gosh. I love being a mom. I'll start there. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I was very miserable, but I was still very active. I remember going to my union meetings, going out to protests. We did a row protest that got, thousands of people here, and I'm helping lead it. And I'm 35 weeks pregnant. the anti-choice people are like, ma'am, we can help you. And I'm like looking at him like, dude, I'm obviously keeping it. I'm huge, but having yeah, it was crazy. But having my daughter honestly made me more dedicated to what I'm doing, because I realize that the world that we are going to be building is a world that she's going to help build and inherit. So it makes me really emotional when I think about becoming a mother and organizing still after I've had my daughter, because I had a why before, but that why seemed very far away and just very far away. And then after I had my daughter, it was a situation where it's like I'm looking at the why right here. Like I want her and everybody else to inherit this world that we're fighting for, and just not have to worry about the things that we've had to worry about, not have to be terrorized by police here in the South. Like I want her to grow up and be safe and be okay. So yeah, it has been the biggest blessing of my life having my daughter. And a lot of people think that when you have kids, you quit organizing. But for me, it was the complete opposite. I had my daughter. I was organizing while I was in labor. After I had her, we were organizing like a pop-up shop. We stayed active. I think I had maybe like a week or two of downtime. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm bored. So she went to her first community meeting when she was, like a small little thing. And, now she comes to everything. She's the people's baby. But yeah, it is the biggest, thus far, it has been the biggest blessing of I just love her so much. So, I'll stop being a softie, but no, she's given me a new sense of strength and energy, because it's just, the job's not finished. We have so much more that we have to do and we have to fight for, because we want our kids and, just everybody to grow up in a peaceful, serene world,
No, that's wonderful. I mean, it's and clearly you're a wonderful role model for your daughter and for your students. So yes, because things don't change unless we change them.
Oh yeah.
And so, I wanted to ask you also about there's been this question of democracy, which I see throughout the country. We just had on Fight Back Radio. Anthony Driver, who was the leader of this fight for the Police Accountability Board, the law that just passed, Empowering Communities for Public Safety here in Chicago. And he talked about, this whole issue with the police. A lot of it was, he said, is an expansion of democracy and people, especially in the Black community, but throughout Chicago. Really being trained up on how, the inner workings of the system, and taking a piece of power, and it strikes me also that this is a battle, not just it's police accountability in Chicago, Jacksonville, other places, but it's also other things too. I mean, the right to work law in Michigan was just overturned for the first time. I think yes, yay, we can cheer that, and because usually all these states have been taking away union rights. But here's a state that actually gave union rights back. And it's like since the 30s, we've been losing union rights. And maybe we got something somewhere. But that's the biggest thing I've heard of. But also the battle, we lose battles too. In Tennessee, they just kicked 2 black legislators out of the legislature for waging as a quorum thing, a minor protest. It was a protest, but it wasn't a major violation. But they kicked them out of the legislature in Jackson, Mississippi. They just took over control of a whole section. The state took over control of whole sections of the city, denying a mostly black city control over water and some other things. And there's been some of this in Florida too. Can you talk a little bit about the battle for democracy and what that looks like and why it's important?
Yeah, we're honestly at the frontier of a new normal here in Florida, and a lot of places in the South as well. We're seeing an attack on just democratic rights, democratic principles. I believe what we're seeing is a 2.5 year long backlash from the uprising in 2020. Cities across the state of Florida, cities across the South rose up to demand justice for George Floyd. And what we've experienced, the 2 legislative sessions have been nothing short of hell and backlash from the power that we held when we marched in the thousands. So in Florida, there's a lot of undemocratic bills that have been proposed. The 6-week abortion ban was signed into law. 6 weeks is before a lot of people realized that they're pregnant. When I was 6 weeks pregnant, if I hadn't been actively trying to conceive, I wouldn't have known. There was really no change that I had. The school choice bill as well, because the defunding of public education is ultimately an issue here as well. Then there's a bill that is the most anti-immigrant legislation that's ever been filed at the state level. It's SB 1718, HB 1617. It makes it a 3rd-degree felony to live in the same house as an undocumented immigrant, which many mixed status families do. So you're essentially making it a felony for people to be families. It also mandates healthcare professionals violate HIPAA to disclose patients' immigration status. This was something that was passed in a committee in the Senate with 15 yeas and 5 nays. And this is something that is making its way to the governor's desk. We have legislation that is being proposed that is essentially going to be criminalizing parents that help their children become the best versions of themselves. There was legislation in there that would make it legal for a non-custodial parent to kidnap a trans child from the custodial parent because it's child abuse. There's a lot. There are a lot of bills here that have been proposed that have been essentially an attack on just democratic rights. Even the anti-union bill that has been proposed that is going to significantly wound working class public sector unions here and working class people here. It is a complete attack on everything that we have been trying to build. They're even trying to push something through the legislature that is going to preemptively ban rent control. As rent is skyrocketing and more people are becoming homeless, their option or their response to that is to ban rent control or preemptively ban rent control instead of providing more affordable housing. We've seen SB 266, HB 999. It's going to ban certain majors, specifically those that have any critical theory involved in them at all. It bans diversity, equity, and inclusion programs on campuses, which when I was a student activist, this is something that we fought for to have on campus, a voice for minority students that may not have felt welcomed. It also it weakens our tenure system here that has already been weakened a lot. It could also ban multicultural sororities and fraternities, which are a big thing here. So there's been a lot of things that have been proposed by our governor. And even last year or 2 sessions ago, actually, there was HB1, which was the anti-protesting bill, which criminalized various forms of protests. And there was even something in the bill, and it was amended, that would make it legal for people to run you over with their car if you're protesting in the street. So we're at a new frontier here in Florida and in the South where legislators they're going for blood. They're going for blood. Yeah. It's been rough.
Well, I mean, this could be demoralizing, but you clearly are not demoralized. No. You're fighting mad. I can tell.
Yeah. It makes me angry. It doesn't demoralize me. It makes me angry. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So what do you tell people that are demoralized or are like, oh my God, you can't beat them? What's your response to that kind of?
I mean, it's no, it's not enough to be apathetic. It's not enough to sit around when things are on fire and be like, well, we can't beat them, because that's exactly what they want you to do, is sit around and do nothing as they continue to beat them. No, you just have to continue to fight back. Every blow weakens the enemy by a little bit. So you have to get up and you have to fight back. Join a community organization, message your senator. Sitting on your armchair and doing nothing is not acceptable. Yes, the South is on fire. Yes, Florida is on fire, and we're at a new frontier when it comes to our democratic rights and democratic principles. But we're going to get to that frontier and dive off that cliff a lot faster if we don't have people fighting.
You mentioned this anti-union bill a couple of times here. Could you tell us a little bit about what are they trying to do? I mean, frankly, from where I'm sitting in Chicago, it seemed like Florida had outlawed a lot of the union rights that they possibly could. But can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
and how labor is responding?
Yeah, so HB 256, or Senate Bill 256, HB 1445 is anti-union legislation. It essentially says that you have to have 60% or more of eligible employees to be in the union, or you get completely decertified. It ends payroll deduction, so you can't have your union dues taken out of your bank account. It bans or it prohibits giving out union literature at school. There's some elements that make it to where you're not allowed to conduct union business at school. And a lot of the stuff is very vague on purpose. Like, for example, there's sometimes at my school during my lunch where I have to go and represent a worker. In that bill, the tenets of that bill, I may not be able to do something like that at our school. There's a lot of different things, and they purposely, it was already at 50%. You had to represent at least 50%, but they looked at the list of teachers unions to see across the state to see where most of them are, and almost all of them are above 50, but not all of them are above 60. So what we're seeing with this anti-union bill is the governor himself has been championing this for the last 2 to 3 years, and he is attacking our unions, and it will, if passed, wound public sector unions and negatively impact the workers here in Florida. It will be horrible. If passed as is, it will be terrible, and it will affect the workers here in Florida because it essentially eliminates their right to collectively bargain at work.
No, that's terrible. I mean, this is again going an attack on democracy and any kind of workers' rights to stand up for themselves or speak together or whatever. I mean, this is, I think recognized around the world that, unions are a basic democratic right. And here we are busting them in Florida and other places around the United States. To the degree I know the Florida labor movement's been weakened a lot already through different laws and attacks from the rich. What's been the response of, and what does organized labor look like in Florida right now?
I mean, we're still here. We're still fighting. Like you said, there have been wealthy people that have been coming in to try to defund and decertify our unions for years. In fact, this legislation has been championed by anti-worker organizations that don't even live in Florida. What our labor movement essentially looks like is there's people of various ages. It's multinational. There's people that go up for lobby days and talk to representatives. AFSCME, CWA, and a lot of other unions just recently went up to the Capitol in Tallahassee when the bill was being heard, and there was hundreds of them in the Capitol area chanting, protesting, and demanding that these legislators do not pass this legislation that is going to mortally wound our unions here. So we are fighting back. We're still here. People, like I said, at my school, the majority of us are in union. I think our percentage is about 88% of us are union. So what we see on the teacher side of things, especially within our teachers union here in Duval County, is we have a high level of members, participation, and activity. So we're still fighting back. We're still here. A lot of bills have come up to try to hurt us, but we're still here. But this one specifically, as written, will wound us. There's really no getting out of that. There's no maneuvering that like it has been in the past.
No, they keep trying. Absolutely. Well, let me ask you then about, I want to shift a little bit here, and thank you for all of this about, education and about, the Jacksonville Community Action Committee. But you're also, besides being a mother, a local leader in the community and in your union, you're also a national leader. You're the treasurer of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, which was founded a couple of years ago, refounded, I should say. It was initially founded in I think 1971, maybe I'm not sure, but was refounded a few years ago in Chicago, and then we had pandemic and everything else. Can you kind of update people since the refounding, what is the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression? What is that organization and what is it doing? And then I know you're having a convention coming up. Maybe you want to give that a plug as well.
Yeah, so the National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression is a group that has multiple affiliates and chapters across the country that are fighting for community control of the police. Since the refounding conference, initial refounding conference that we had in 2019, we have launched militant struggles across the country. Almost all of our chapters during the uprising of 2020, almost all of our chapters participated in some form of protest, action, call-in to demand justice for George Floyd and other victims of police violence. We have many national actions. We have statements that we put out. We are a amazing fighting organization that's always looking for new chapters and new affiliates to join. We have a conference that's coming up in Chicago. It will be the first week of November. We will have a rally on Friday, and then we will conduct other conference business Saturday, all day Saturday, and then part of Sunday as well. It's actually the 50th anniversary, or it's been 50 years since the original founding of NAARPR. So we are going to be doing a big celebration. We're encouraging people to buy ads in the program book that we're going to be sending out. It is going to be big, bold, and amazing. So we're really excited. We're trying to make it something that is better than the one that we had in 2019. And that one was extremely impressive and even bigger than our delegated conference that we had in 21.
So, I know, I think both of those were in Chicago at the Chicago Teachers Union. And this is my union, so I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to host the National Alliance. And we will be hosting again this fall of 2023, the first weekend in November. So people should plan on that. We'll put in the show notes how people can, get in contact with the National Alliance. And if you're interested in, joining the National Alliance, or if you have a group that wants to affiliate that's doing this kind of work, you should definitely contact them. The National Alliance has a history, though, too. I mean, it started out with Angela Davis being arrested on some trumped-up charges back in the early 70s. Could you talk a little bit about the history? And I know at the refounding, several of the chapters had survived, from the original, and then and the others I think have all completely embraced this history. And so, could you talk a little bit about that and what it is and what your thoughts are about that?
Yeah, so it's funny. I forgot to mention that we did have Angela Davis at the first refounding conference to celebrate the history of that. The National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression was started to free Angela Davis, a Free Angela Davis campaign after she was arrested on the trumped-up charges, as you stated. It is and has been a militant Black organization that survived various forms of repression. Ultimately, it did kind of, peter out, and that's why we decided to refound it in 2019 with some of the original members and original chapters that were still on deck. Frank Chapman is actually going to be working very closely with some of those original members and original chapters to get them to come to this refounding conference since it is the 50-year. Since it is the 50-year anniversary of the first founding. He thinks, and we think, that this is going to be a great idea to essentially see the giants that started this work and invested in this work before the refounding actually happened. And I know I'm very excited to see these living examples of history and to learn more about, what they did when they first founded the National Alliance. So we are an organization that is just a militant organization that fights for police accountability, criminal justice. I mean, we see parallels from when the National Alliance was first started to free Angela Davis to now. Different chapters within the National Alliance are working to free political prisoners or victims of police torture, so we still are keeping that same fighting spirit within the National Alliance.
No, that's wonderful. You mentioned also that you talked about George Floyd and how your chapters, after the murder, the lynching of George Floyd happened, that people, all the chapters were active across the country, and it struck me that the National Alliance was the one organization that actually had some kind of national coordination and national presence in the aftermath, and made, along with others, but we played a critical role, I thought, in making the George Floyd protest and rebellion a national thing with a single call, and not, so often, the rich will find some guy to come and say, I speak for everybody. But actually, it's harder to do that if you have organization. And so could you talk a little bit about, in the aftermath of George Floyd's death, how the Alliance, how did you coordinate all that? What were some of the discussions you might have been having? And you as a national leader, how did you see that time?
Yeah, I mean, so speaking specifically with 2020 and the National Alliance, it was like multiple things back to back. We had Ahmaud Arbery that happened, I believe, in February or March, who was lynched in Georgia by the McMichaels. Yep. And another person just tracked down and lynched, and that was very horrible. So we put out a call to our chapters and affiliates to do something in their cities. Here in Jacksonville, we had a rally that had 200 people. That's a lot for us. We were like, okay, this is great. Yeah. A couple weeks later, unfortunately, or a couple months later, we, had George Floyd. And I remember seeing the video and, talking with the board members of the National Alliance and all of us just being like, yeah, we have to do something. Like, this is... It knocked the life out of not life, but it knocked the breath out of a lot of us. But we knew that we couldn't just stand there and not act. So we knew inaction was not acceptable. So we put out a national statement, a national call for all affiliates, chapters, and friends of the movement to essentially call for justice for George Floyd in whatever form that looks like, whether it's protesting, whether it's doing call-ins. But we had a coordinated response to a brutal lynching that happened to be caught on camera. And there was 3 weeks of marches here in Jacksonville and many more weeks in other cities. Here in Jacksonville, our first event, it was me and one of our other friends within our, within our group here, in which we had a rally. We had one megaphone. I remember we were on a planning meeting, and Mike Sampson goes, I think there's going to be 150 people. And we pull up, and the entire parking lot is so full that people just look like ants bunched in together. And the final count for that first rally was 3,000 people. Okay.
Wow.
And yeah, it was crazy. But the thing is, around the country, it was like that as well. And then more people came out because that same week, Trump went and called us criminals and basically told us that, this wasn't a big deal, screw it. And it pissed a lot of people off. So we called something again, for that following week. And in Jacksonville, 10,000 people showed up. 3 times the amount, almost more than 3 times the amount at the first event. And that happened for people around the country, where that second event was the largest one, strictly because of all the fire that Trump poured onto an already disastrous situation. So as a National Alliance, we look at things that are happening in the world, and we help our members and our affiliates relate to these things. There's a lot of stuff happening. We look at ourselves as, a line of defense when it comes to police crimes that occur in this country, a working organization that is fighting for community control of the police, fighting for a better world, fighting for a better country that is not for the few, but for the many.
No, that's wonderful. Unfortunately for us, our time is starting to wind down here.
It's okay.
This has been such a joy to interview you. But is there anything I forgot? Anything you want to add for our Fight Back Radio listeners?
No, yes, there is actually. Please, if you are interested in learning more about the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, please join us the first weekend of November. The call will be put out soon in Chicago at the Chicago Teachers Union Hall to talk about the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. It'll be our 50-year anniversary since the original founding, so we are going to make it big and bold. So if you want to know how you can fight against police crimes in your city or your state, please come to the conference. It's going to be great.
Well, thank you so much, Monique. This has been a wonderful experience, and best of luck with you with organizing the big conference in Chicago, and the best of luck with you in Jacksonville in terms of fighting for justice in your community and in your school.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, Monique Sampson, I hope that inspired you the same way it inspired me. And I want to encourage people again to come to Chicago for the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression's convention. Also, I want to encourage people to help promote Fight Back Radio. Give us 5 stars, give us a positive review, follow us. All those things help people find us. And the last couple episodes have been we've gotten a big bump, and we want to continue that process. So, and I think you know people who want to hear this episode with Monique. And so send them an email or a text or a tweet or whatever, retweet our tweets, all those things, like I said, help people find us. If you want to contact us and tell us, who you think we should have as a guest or how we could make things better here, or just give us, some criticism, we always appreciate that. You can reach us at richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com. Finally, I want to thank our crack production team, who without them, none of this happens. Natalie Pranis, Dodd McColgan, Shane Tremley, and Vince Olson. And I'm Richard Berg, saying for the entire Fight Back Radio team, until next time, all power to the people.